This will be informative 30 minutes. We have a mix of office managers to IT managers to directors on the call webinar today. We hope you find this information informative, but light-hearted, but equally the information can be applied to your internal staff as well as your business. We're very saddened about the things that are happening in the world at the moment today. So we felt the need to get involved and actually help our businesses look after. We appreciate you're very busy with your own businesses. And what I'm going to do is hand you over to my colleague Noel, who's our head of technology. He'll give you an overview and insight into how we feel that we can help you as businesses and individuals protect yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Noel. Thanks very much for your time.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can. This grey, miserable morning is not too bad for everybody. Welcome to the Equate Group Cyber Threat Breakfast Briefing for small and medium businesses in light of Russia and Ukraine's conflict. As Alex said, my name's Noel, and I'll be guiding you through the murky world of cyber threat, some examples of previous incidents, and a look at the global threat landscape. At any time during the presentation, you can ask questions using the chat, and either I or the team will respond at the end. We're aiming to complete this briefing in 20-25 minutes, and we'll devote 10 minutes at the end for the Q&A. So, without further ado, we're going to deal with facts and propaganda. Not propaganda. Everything in this presentation has been fact-checked, and where appropriate, we've added source attributions to the slides. We've worked hard to be apolitical and, as will become clear, as impartial as possible. We make no warranty as to the content of this webinar, as the threat landscape is in a state of flux, like the world has never seen before. I've even had to make some updates this morning to some of the slides based on the latest intel. The goal here is to inform you in making choices, as you are bound to be getting bombarded, as I am, by people trying to sell you cybersecurity products. We do, of course, have our own offerings, but we'll get to that at the end. But this is not a sales presentation. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering. I'm going to run you through some of the terminology I'll be using. It's shorthand, it's nerdy techie stuff, but once you understand it, it'll help demystify things. We also want to point out that the threat is not just from Russia. We'll look at what else is out there and what will continue to be an issue. How real is this threat? It's real. Spoiler alert, it's really very real. But it's not coming from where you expect. Size doesn't matter in cybersecurity. Even a small or micro business, your size has no defense. And in the cybersecurity world, prevention really is better than cure. I'll explain why. And then we're going to look at what you can do to secure your organization today, or even over the weekend. And then we'll have a quick Q&A at the end. So let's rattle through some terminology. You'll hear me use the word term threat actor. This is a person or organization that poses a threat to you and your organization or your company. We used to use the word hacker, but that doesn't really fit in the cybersecurity world, because hackers also have positive connotations. There are several categories of threat actor. We'll go through those shortly. An APT is another term you will hear me use. This is short for advanced persistent threat. It's a hacker gang, or and a threat actor gang, in simple words, that have been identified. It's not just some random, this is a coordinated effort that's been identified and given a tag by the cybersecurity industry. A well-known one is known, depending on who you talk to, as either APT28, Fancy Bear, Voodoo Bear, or Sandworm. And we'll talk a bit more about Sandworm shortly. TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Let me just put my teeth back in. These are the things that allow the threat hunters and the cybersecurity world to identify the persistent threats. These are the fingerprints. This comes from code. This comes from the way they deploy their malware, etc. When I talk about infrastructure, what I'm talking about is not your network infrastructure as such, although that does fit in. What I'm talking about here is utilities, transportation, supply chains, cloud services, fuel supplies, telecommunications, and even health services. Anything we rely on a day-to-day basis. An exploit is how the bad guys make sense of a vulnerability to wreak havoc in their own particular way. A vulnerability is a flaw or bug or a door that hasn't been shut in a network or software that can be exploited to do crazy things. A zero day is the most dangerous kind of vulnerability because there is no patch, there is no way to block it. Once this is in the wild, it gets exploited, and this is something that can be fixed with a patch, but you have to wait for the manufacturer or the software house or whoever to deliver the patch, and in that time there is a vulnerability unless there's a workaround. Cloud, this is somebody else's computer. They say there's no such thing as a cloud. It's just someone else's computer. This is true. This is a computing time that you pay for on a daily or monthly or hourly basis. Things like Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, etc. And finally, the other term you will hear me use is SaaS, software as a service, such as Office 365, Google Suite, Salesforce, and basically anything you pay for that's software that you probably access via a browser that's hosted in the cloud is, for the purposes at least of this presentation, referred to as SaaS. So let's move on. Let's take a moment to look about who the bad guys, and oh yes, spoiler alert, it's not just the Russians. As I mentioned, there are several types of threat actors. They've been categorized into about 6 or 7, depending again your source. But there's only really 3 we need to worry about. You've got the criminal gangs. These are cyber criminals. They're not interested unless they can make a buck. They're the guys that will ransomware your computers for Bitcoin, as well as run scams. And you can guarantee that they are already making fistfuls of cash off the back of the turmoil. The bottom line here is the criminal threat players will only bother with money, unless, of course, they're being paid by a third party for their services. This brings us on to the ideologues. They are hacking for a cause. They don't care about anything as crass as money. You can divide them into 2 groups. You've got the hacktivists like Anonymous, who are attacking Russia at the moment, and then you've got the terrorists. The hacktivists are hacking for a cause. As I said, the terrorists are hacking to cause terror or causing mayhem. Both subgroups will be out there right now. We already know, it's already public information, that Anonymous are working because right now the world's cybersecurity focuses on Moscow and Ukraine. And now let's get on to the really big threat. Nation states. State-sponsored threats are massive. As we'll cover shortly, the cyber war has been raging for years, probably decades, and it's the massive nation states or nation state-sponsored APTs that are conducting it. The nation state APTs are by far the best resourced and the most dangerous on a global scale. However, they are almost zero direct threat to a small medium business unless you are dealing with either side. But no, I said direct. There is a massive indirect threat. More on that next. All the so-called first world countries, and certainly all NATO countries, have a cyber capability for both offensive and defensive nature. In the UK, we have GCHQ and its public face, the National Cyber Security Centre. And in the US, we have the NSA and various other three-letter agencies. And you have to factor in the Chinese, the Iranians, and the North Koreans. Also, one should also remember an offensive cyber team on our side is an APT on their side. And we know everywhere in the media, and it's not just propaganda, that the threat to the UK is very real. And more importantly, to your organization, it is a real, immediate, and potentially catastrophic threat. But as we alluded to, it's not coming from where you think. To put this into context here, there's a summary of, let me summarize a series of events from 5 years ago. It was a balmy Sunday afternoon in Copenhagen on the June the 27th, 2017, and the world's largest shipping conglomerate, along with several other massive companies, were about to lose their collective minds. As a piece of malware deployed against Ukraine's infrastructure escaped its intended target and began to rip its way through global networks. And in Copenhagen, AP Møller-Mærsk lost control of its global data network in a matter of minutes. They say they couldn't pull the plugs out fast enough. As did pharmaceutical giants Merck, couriers FedEx, TNT Express, DHL, advertising behemoth WPP, food company Mondes International, formerly known as Kraft Foods, and eventually even the Russian oil company Rosneft, to name but a few. As well as a number of smaller organizations, including Princeton Community Hospital in rural West Virginia, that had to scrap its entire computer network as a direct effect when this appeared on every computer on the entire network. Ransomware, or at least so it appeared. Maersk, nor any of the other companies I listed, were targets, nor were the 150 multinationals understood to have been affected. By the end of the attack, the White House conservatively estimated the cost was in excess of $10 billion to clean up and mitigate alone. And it's safe to say that this one attack decimated numerous small companies in the supply chain. This very nasty digital pathogen would become known as NotPetya. And if you're wondering why it became known as NotPetya, this is the screen that the earlier version, called Petra, threw up when it was ransomwaring a computer. And this is the NotPetya screen. They look the same, right? That's because they are the same. However, Petya was a pussycat compared to its successor. Even if you paid the NotPetya ransom and entered the key, it would completely wipe your hard drive. The attack turns out to be launched by Sandworm. See, I said I've mentioned them again, who commonly understood to be a unit of the GRU, aka Russian military intelligence. And they're the same team that leaked Macron's emails back in 2017 and attempted to frame North Korea for an attack on the 2018 Winter Olympics. And there's a really good book about this called Sandworm by Andy Greenberg. I highly recommend a read if you are interested. The whole NotPetya attack shows how dangerous collateral damage can be when a cyber weapon spreads beyond its intended target. This is because Windows is Windows, macOS is macOS, iOS is iOS, and Android is Android, regardless of the language on the screen, and unless all patches are routinely applied, all devices then have the same vulnerability, including 0 days, which can give an exploit a foothold on your network. So malware aimed at Russian infrastructure or command and control by NATO forces or quote unquote the good guys will end up potentially on your network via some convoluted route or even via one of your customers or part of your supply chain. And let's not forget the other nation state APTs out there, such as China, Iran, and North Korea. They are still out there. They will be active either in support of one side or another, or maybe just muddying the waters. So reports from threat hunters of a new threat called Hermetic Wiper, Isaac Wiper, and Hermetic Wizard have been circulating for a few days and are now hitting the mainstream media. Reports indicate that Hermetic Wizard is a worm that can rapidly invade all computers on a network and deliver the Hermetic Wiper malware. Hermetic Wizard and Wiper have been detected on hundreds of systems in 5 Ukrainian organizations, and another Wiper threat tagged Isaac Wiper was detected on at least one government network, according to the Slovakian company ESET. However, and this is the slide I had to update, overnight, major security threat hunting companies and even Microsoft have released a warning about a new nasty they've dubbed Foxblade, which has been discovered on Ukrainian government systems. And they're also warning on an increased rate of phishing attacks originating in Russia in the last 24 hours that are attacking or targeting organizations in NATO and allied countries. Microsoft is very cagey about what Foxblade does. However, it's understood to be a Trojan that can be used at least to deliver a distributed denial of service or DDoS attack. When I talk to customers about the whole cybersecurity thing, I often hear something along the lines of, we're a small business. Cyber attacks only happen to large companies, or we don't have the budget, it's so expensive, or frequently a combination of the two. Let me bust this myth wide open right here, right now. A cyber attack on even a small or medium business can and often does take the company down permanently. As not yet the NotPetya incident made clear, even paying the ransomware does not guarantee you get your data back. Especially those that have taken a head in the sand approach to the cyber security issue. If your business is dependent on any of the following, such as Microsoft, Apple, Android, you're using file shares rather than the server. You share logins for devices or cloud services, or you use purely on-premise backups or no backups. Then if you have answered yes to any of these questions, you are at risk. And that's basically everybody. The other thing people say to me is, oh, it's all in the cloud. It can't, then it's all safely stored in the cloud. Sorry, you're wrong. Another myth is that your data is safe when you're using cloud services such as Google, Microsoft 365, Salesforce. None of the cloud service providers take a single jot of responsibility for your data. It's in the terms and conditions that none of us read. Which means that if you get attacked or they get attacked, all your data in the cloud could be lost or deliberately corrupted beyond recovery. And of course, just backing up files locally causes all kinds of issues with versions and that sort of thing, and offers very little protection because you're relying on local infrastructure, which is fragile. At the end of the day, it's the tenant's responsibility to protect their data. All my customers who we provide Office 365 services for, everything is backed up constantly, emails, etc. So in the cybersecurity world, time and time again, the adage about prevention is better than cure is proven to be right. While you can't 100% prevent a cyber attack from happening, especially if there's a 0-day involved, there is much that can be done. GCHQ's National Cybersecurity Centres raised the cyber threat level to heightened in light of the current geopolitical situation and issued detailed guidance for all organisations. First, assess your risk. By its nature, risk assessment is subjective, and what would be acceptable for a dog groomer would be disastrous for a vet, and the same applies to a car wash and an accident repair business. My advice is simple. Imagine overnight you lost all your data, and I mean all of it. Your CRM, your emails, your accounts, your backups, and all your devices were ransomware or worse, trashed. Then ask yourself, how long can the business survive? This nightmare scenario happens more regularly than anyone in the SMB world would like to admit. And we at Equate estimate that even a small 2-person business will be down for at least a week, probably 2, given the time required to first source and replace equipment, especially given the current COVID-related supply chain issues, configure it, and then start seeing what data can be recovered. So let's look at what that means in real terms, in cash terms. If we look at the cost of attack for even a small micro business with 2 members of staff and a turnover of, say, £260,000 in a regulated sector that has gone down it won't happen to us path, stuck their head in the sand and has no discernible cyber defenses, facing a nightmare scenario of everything being disabled by one of the many wiper malwares. Things get expensive very fast. Each week they are down will cost them at least £5,000 in lost revenue. They'll have to replace all the hardware, which is at least another £5,000. Then you're looking at all the professional services that need to be consulted, the accountant to get back your accounts, the lawyers to look at exposure, maybe do some negotiating with you, for you, perhaps a PR agency to handle any adverse publicity, and of course an IT company to put things back together. This is an easy average of £10,000 per specialist, and they may want a sizable amount up front. Then the regulator and the Information Commissioner's Office will need to be informed, and depending on how good the lawyers are, that could be easily be another 10 grand in fines and fees. Then look at lost cancelled contracts, damage to reputation, increased insurance costs, etc. And this will soon hit £20,000. and then you need to put something aside to allow for settling potential data breach claims for several years. So a contingency fund of, shall we say, 20 grand. So now we're at £100,000. And for the record, Equate could have mitigated a lot of that damage and provided full support for the whole company for less than £900 a year. That's less than 1% of the cost of attack. So moving on. The threat an organization faces will vary over time, and at any point there's, you've got to balance it. You're not going to go and spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on kit when we've already established the risk to your company may be a lot less. But it's a matter of prioritizing. It's a matter of looking at what is possible and looking at what you want to do and what your risk appetite is. So the most fundamental thing an organization can do is act. It is as simple as that. Look at your cybersecurity, do it today, because weekends tend to be when the nasties happen. So let's look at some next steps. You've got your risk score in mind. We've all done, I know everybody out there has probably done a very, very quick calculation. Remember, the bigger the organization, the more sites you have, the cost increases exponentially. So what are your next steps? Take a look at your access management. Review your password policy. Create one if you don't have one. And ensure all staff have read it and understood it. Ensure that users understand that passwords need to be unique and strong passwords. And look at deploying a password manager such as, I don't know, Parsley, LastPass, 1Password. There are numerous out there that are good. Review all your user accounts across the entire estate. Remove old and unused passwords and enable multi-factor or MFA for everybody. Although, MFA is the gold standard at the moment, there are other technologies you can use. Review all privileged or administrative accounts. These are the guys at super user level that can see everything and therefore can delete everything. If their accounts get compromised, that's a problem. And consider your overall system administration architecture to better understand the risk in that area. Ensure your antivirus is up to date and fit for purpose. Let me just say the free version of McAfee that you get with your computer needs removing. Microsoft's Defender's better. Check your firewalls are as expected, specifically check for something that may have been opened to allow for some testing or allow for supplier to do some work or whatever. Deploy some form of MDM. And MDM is a mobile device manager. It lets you manage and control what happens on the PC. It deploys your policies to remote devices. And on desktops. Works beautifully well on desktops as well. And gives you the chance to actually push code, push applications to that device that the user needs. So it's definitely worth a look. Audit all your endpoints, removing the applications or services that are no longer there or shouldn't have been there in the first place. Especially post-COVID, post people working from home, you can guarantee that there's several laptops in your fleet that will have games and talk to clients that should not be on there for Tor and etc. Teach the end users how to spot phishing emails. Cyber security awareness training. I'm not going to go through all these items. I'll let you read them. Cyber security awareness training is gold standard stuff. Your biggest single threat to on the inside of your company is a user and a user clicking the wrong link in an email. It is as simple as that. Every phishing, well, no, not every phishing attack. The majority of phishing attacks go back to, or the cyber attacks go back to a phishing email. Ensure that everything's patched. It's common sense. The more you patch, the more up to date your patches are, the less 0 days that will exist. The less well-known holes in software. Look at some network and endpoint monitoring. You need to know if a machine is reporting or occasionally reporting it's got a virus or something else nasty. You need to monitor your firewalls for unusual activity. Consider using a managed SOC. That's a security operations center. It's manned 24/7, 365. And when a device is getting hammered or attacked or there's suspicious activity, a good SOC will call the IT guys and say, look, you've got a problem with this machine. And a good SOC can isolate that machine from the network remotely. So just bear that in mind. Also, look for unapproved applications, as we mentioned in the previous slide. Shadow IT is a major threat. By shadow IT, I mean stuff that shouldn't be there, or unapproved anyway. And make sure you are backing everything up. Your cloud and SaaS platform data from Office 365, Google, Salesforce, etc., need to be backed up regularly. And a backup's no good unless you know it works. When did you last do a restore? If you have a backup program, when did you last do a restore test? That is just critical. And finally, okay, this is the one salesy-ish slide. How can we help you protect your organization? We have all these services available. We have a 24/7 SOC. We can do your virus. We can do your cybersecurity awareness training. We can do your patch monitoring, patch management. We can do your monitoring, and we certainly can do your backups. So I'm going to hand back to Alex and let him take over, and then we can go from there on to Q&A. Hopefully, Alex and Pat have got a few of those lined up for me. Alex, back to you, mate.
Thanks, Noel. Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, Noel. We hope that the information there was not sort of too highbrow, that you can sort of have some takeaways for your businesses or personally and support your team internally. Because I think the whole idea really today is just awareness. A lot of you may be engaging with all these things at the moment, but equally, if you need to have those conversations, you'd like to sort of chat to us, we're here to support you. And felt that historically we've been very sort of voice heavy, but we are a full sort of IT MSP. So those conversations we are having with clients and also supporting and supplying. So I think particularly in the world we're in at the moment, we need to be really aware of these. And sometimes it's not always that easy to get out to clients at the moment with COVID and all the rest of it. So I hope you appreciate and thank you, Noel, for all your information. There's probably quite a few questions which will come out of that. Noel's going to have the presentation on a sort of PDF so that we can send that out to people that want to have that sort of a hard copy or soft copy, and then we can have the conversations afterwards. But I know your time is precious on a morning, and that's why we had the breakfast side of things. And I hope you sort of work well for you, and we'll be doing future ones when the topics arise that we think are relevant to our clients and information that we need to sort of send out to everyone that we look after. Noel, do you have any questions that people have sent in?
If anyone's got any questions, please pop them in the chat now, or we can move on. There is I have been recording this, so there is a recording available. Will be available. You'll be